It all started when the Imperium seized control of Earth and declared martial law, sentencing those who opposed their will to immediate death or worse fates. It seemed as if all hope was lost, but before their edict could be carried out, a group of defectors managed to wrest control of the Ridback, a Class II jump ship, and flee with as many of the condemned as they could save. It's been close to 7 years since those refugees from Earth have called the Ridback home, and finally, the crew has found a planet with promise. They have managed to establish outposts around it, and now the great burden falls on you to expand these small alphas into full-fledged beta colonies. Success will mean that your people will be able to begin life anew on exoplanet 14 Boss C, or as they've renamed it, Victus, Latin for way of life. Okay, so I guess that's the theme of this. There we go. All right, so moving on from there, what are you guys looking at here? So obviously we have the main board here, and this is essentially one big rondel right here in the middle with all of our individual ships out here. We have 3 colonies with different colored hexes or different locations in which we're going to be able to place some of these tiles, or pods will go out onto these 3 named colonies. Then over here we have the various, call them end of round, beginning of round cards, the cycle cards here. We have the round track there. Then at the top right, up above the board, we have the cultural achievements up here, there. And then we have the various pod tiles here, as well as the other ones that will come out as the game goes along. Then on everybody's individual player board, so their player board has a few different places. Everyone has spaces for their spent or expended dice right here, a place for their materials or their resources there, their fuel, which are these markers right here, and artifacts, which are the gold colored ones right there. Everyone also has 4 dice, as well as various player markers in their own color. They also have markers out here for the 3 colony tracks, as well as companion points. I think they're victory points for the victory point track.
Maybe colonization points or something like that.
Go with it.
CP.
Victory points.
Yeah.
There we go. That's what you need to know. And we have a first player marker right there, which I got to be honest, looking at the ship, which is the Ridback, it really looks like a
frying pan?
Well, see, I see it as one of those, a rotary blade for like cutting out 18XX tiles and whatnot, but nonetheless, that's what you guys, that's all the components that we're looking at, all right? So now, the game is played over a total of 9 rounds, and each of those 9 rounds is divided into a cycle, which is a first cycle, second cycle, third cycle, and further within each cycle, you have 3 rounds, okay? So how the basic overview of a round is as simple as whoever the start player is, they're going to roll their 4 dice. And then every other player is going to match their dice exactly how, if this is how I rolled, something along the lines of this, I would say everybody set your black die to 2, your green to 4, your blue to 6, and your red to 6. And then at that point, in turn order, each player is going to perform their first action, which is going to use any 2 of their dice to then move around the rondel, and then for 1 die, and then the second die actually take the action that is associated with the spot where their ship went. We're going to do that once, then we'll go clockwise to the next player, then the next player, then we'll do it a second time, a second time, a second time, and then we'll advance the round marker. We'll do that a total of 9 times, then we'll go into end of game scoring. Whoever has the most points wins. So that's kind of big picture what we're trying to do in Beta Colony, all right? All right. Now, obviously, there's a lot more details here, but not nearly as much as you might think, all right? So again, let's go over. The round begins. The first player is going to roll their dice. Everybody else is going to set their dice to exactly whatever that is. Then on their turn, they're going to choose 1 of their dice to then move around out onto the roll-del, since we're rolling dice in a rondel type fashion here. They're going to move their ship to one space. So the rules on movement are it must move if you're going to take an action. Okay. Now, it can end up in the same space where it began, but you'll notice that these are regular six-sided dice. And if you'll count from, say, this purple ship, you're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it could make it back there. How? Well, every player is going to have some amount of fuel, hopefully, on their player board. And they can use up to 2 fuel, well, technically, yeah, to be able to move up to however, or as much fuel as they have, I should say, to be able to move to a maximum of 8 spaces because, well, if you have 5 fuel, technically you can move 11, but instead you will probably just move 4.
Right.
So that makes sense. Okay, fair enough. So you're not going to move more than 8 realistically.
Right.
You can use any number of fuel to be able to move around the board, to be able to end up at any space. You can share spaces with other players. You can move back to where you were when you began, but you must move if you're going to take an action, okay? Now, when you move, you're going to spend whatever dice that is to then say, my black ship here, let's say I spent 1 fuel and I use, say, this blue die like there to move, so that would have been 7 or possibly 5 to go less, and I ended up back where I was, okay? Then I would choose one of my other available dice. Again, you can use fuel to adjust the number on that die to then do whatever the location says you can do. So we'll go ahead and start out with the Ridback location because this is the easiest one to explain. Whatever the pip value is of the die that you're using, you get however many fuel that matches. So if your pip die is a 1 or a 2, you get 1 fuel, 3 or 4, 2 fuel, 5 or 6, 3 fuel. Easy enough, really simple. I don't think I need to talk anymore. You literally take it from the supply, add it to your board, boom, done. Okay, so if I did that, say using my 2 die, I would move that there, boom, my turn would be over. There you go. I've explained how a turn works. Let's go through the rest of the locations and then we'll explain everything over here as well as all the colonies and the pods over there. Now, there are 3 resource or material gathering locations, okay? So those are the 3 moons, the Gandhi, Geo, and Nebra, all right? So you'll notice that they look identical. So these 3 locations are where we're going to be retrieving material or resources here. So whenever you land on one of those spaces, you then, if the value of the die that you expend there is 1 to 4, you get either a yellow or a blue resource. And yes, they all have technical
polymers and water.
Thank you. I'll leave it to Ken to be the technical assistant on that. So you would get purple or blue or
polymers and water.
Okay. Yeah. On a 1 to 4, on a 5 or 6, you would get 2 of those. You would add them to your material holding space. Boom, done. At the end of your turn, the max you're allowed is 10 resources, so anything you have extra, you lose.
Throw away.
If you use your red die to activate or to claim those resources in that location, you score 1 victory point. Easy enough.
Yep.
This space, and this space are all identical except for 2 things. The color of the activation to score 1 point is different, and it does not matter what the value of the die is. If you use that die, regardless of the value, you score 1 point for all 3 locations. So the color of the die that you can use any, but you only get the bonus if you use that color die.
That's 3 different colors, right? Yeah.
And the only other difference is what resources you're getting, which in this case are green and yellow, or
steel and organics.
Thank you. Or red and pink, which are
palladium and food.
You're hired, bro. Well done. So, all right, we have covered these 4 locations now out on the board. Now the next
clarifying.
Sure.
If you get 2, you can take 1 of each, right?
You can. Yeah. I figured that was implied. You can get 2 of the same. Mix and match however
you want. Yeah.
All right. Now let's talk about the hardest location, which is not hard, but the hardest locations, which are the manufactories. All right, those 2 that Ken is showing you there. So when you land on that location, depending on the value of the die that you use to activate for your second die, it shows which of the available pods you can then claim to then be able to place out here on a colony.
Yep.
So anytime you go to a manufactory, it's going to require you to have 2 materials on your player board minimum. However, there are also these things called artifacts. So these artifacts, we'll probably put them out like that, not that one because that'll roll, like this. These artifacts are multi-use. They can be used as any one wild resource or material if you wish, or for something else that we'll talk about later. So just know that you need 2 materials to be able to do either of these actions, or 1 or 2 artifacts to sub in for it. So let's say I use that die, I move my ship over here to the manufactory, I used whatever number it was, and then I'm saying the 1 or the 2. So in this case, I have a choice of the top 2 pods. So whatever pod I choose to take is going to expend that color resource or material. So looking at this, I don't have a yellow, I do have an artifact, but you know what, I say, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and discard this blue material, and I will choose that blue pod. Now I have another decision to make. With this pod, I can place it on any of the 3 colonies that I wish. All of these spaces out here correspond to a different color material. It has nothing to do with the pod color that you chose. So I can take this blue pod and put it on a yellow location. That's really okay. However, to be able to do so, I must discard that color material, or that type, or again, an artifact, my choice. But as it is, I have a red material, so I'm looking around the board here, and I see this space over here, and I say, you know what, I'm gonna go there. So I'm going to go ahead and place this pod on that. I will expend that red material, and now a number of things is going to happen, okay? The first thing is we're going to look if it has any kind of bonus over here on the left-hand side. So you'll notice that some of these, this one says score 2 points, that's get some fuel. This one says get an artifact. Don't place one of your crew or one of your markers out there onto the tile. And there are others that say place 2 out there. This doesn't say anything. So step 1 is we mark it and claim it as ours. Okay. Step 2 is we're going to determine our influence that we gain to be able to move up this colony influence track around the outside of that track. Now, the number of influence that you're going to score, I don't like using that term because scoring tends to indicate victory points, but this is just for this track up here. But to be able to peg influence, whatever is on the pod is your base number of influence. So in this case, it's going to be 2. Then you can get up to 1 bonus influence if you place on the internal area around the center here, okay?
Right.
Does that make sense?
Right.
So as this is, if I had placed it out here, I wouldn't have gotten that bonus because I'm not adjacent to it. But as it is, I did place out there. And let's say this was already there and it does not matter who controlled it, that was already there previously, you're going to get a maximum of 2. There can be a total of 3 pods of a color directly adjacent to one another.
Right.
When you place your pod, it can be no more than the 3rd in a group of like-minded or like-colored pods,
right.
okay? So in this case, you get 1 point for each existing that it's adjacent to. That's what I'm trying to say. So in this case, I would get 1 bonus for that. So 2, 3, 4 influence. So black would then move 1, 2, 3, 4 up that influence track for that colony. In addition to that, now we're going to get whatever bonuses that we landed on or passed during that movement. So in this case, says I would score 1 victory point, so I would actually get onto the board here, and I would get 2 fuel, I would get 3 additional victory points, and I would get 1 artifact from the supply.
Sounds like a pretty good deal.
It is. And now, on a subsequent, and immediately we will fill up a new pod on that space.
Right.
Now, if there were another blue one that were placed out here directly adjacent to that, whoever places it will get a bonus of 2, plus if they're next to this. If they place it here, they don't have to place it here to get the bonus for 2. If it's a grouping of 3, when they placed it, they will get a bonus of 2, 1 possibly there, and whatever's printed on the tile.
Contiguousness.
Yeah,
basically.
there you go.
Yeah.
Now, if somebody places a 3rd one over here, somebody then could come over here non-adjacent and start another blue grouping. That is allowed. That's okay. But it just can't touch that group of 3 once it's a group of 3.
Yeah.
The only difference between these 3 colonies are the tracks around the outside, around the outside, around the outside. And obviously, once you make it up to the top of an influence track, if you place more pods there, you get no benefit for doing so. You just get it. You may get some sort of end-game benefit, but nothing from the track there. Does that make sense? Does that explain the manufactories clearly?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, good. So that takes care of all of the spaces out here on this rondelle, except for one. And that is, and I'm going to butcher the name of this, and it's going to be the Azophi Nexus. Yeah? Yeah, I'm getting a thumbs up. That work? All right.
Pretty good.
So the Azophi Nexus allows you, when you land on that location, to do one of 2 things. Regardless of the value of the die, get 1 material of your choice from the supply, put it into your material holding. Okay, easy enough. And get 1 fuel. Couldn't be easier. If you used a black die to activate, in other words, regardless of the value there, you score 1 bonus point, just like you would for those 3 locations there. However, there is one other option, which is building a cultural achievement. And let me bring your attention to the cards that are up top. When you go there, you have a choice. You either get the resource and the fuel or the cultural achievement. The cultural achievement, you can purchase these one of 2 ways. You can either, if you have at least 3 artifacts, you can then claim one of the statues of the 4 that are available in the game. If you do so, you get whatever the immediate bonus is that's shown right here, which is 2 points, and place one of your crew on any tile, including someone else's tile. You can do so. There's going to be in-game reasons for possibly doing so. This one, 3 points, and take 1 pod tile and place it out here without paying any cost. That's really nice. 2 points, get a material of your choice, 2 points, and place a crew out here on the board, just like what the first one was. Okay? So you would discard the 3 artifacts, boom, and then you will take you'll take the card, you'll place it in your tableau face down for endgames, whatever the endgame points are, revealed later, or just keep it face up. Then you take this tile, and then you immediately must place it on the outer ring of one of the 3 colonies, and then you're going to place one of your crew. And unfortunately, it doesn't help you on the influence track, but it may help you with some sort of endgame scoring.
And you do have to pay for that slot you
do.
On,
good
right?
call. Good reminder. Anytime you're placing a pod out here, whether it's one of the statues or one of the buildings or one of the pods, you still have to discard a resource matching that color or an artifact. Okay? So if I placed it here, boom, done. Okay? Now the 4th one works very similar, except these, only the top one is available. There's a stack of 4 of them, so as they become available, they become available. Instead of discarding artifacts, it requires 4 resources. It will always require 2 polymers. See, I know Ken would appreciate that. That means it's 2 orange, and then the other 2 resources will vary depending on what the card requires. It's going to have either some sort of bonus or special ability or whatever. This one's just a straight 9 victory points. As those come up, we'll bring them up.
Yep.
Okay? The last thing we need to talk about before we get started are the 3 cards over here. And let me get the exact, the cycle cards. There are 2 things to make note of on the cycle cards. The top half actually triggers at the very beginning of when you enter a cycle. So in other words, this one, and there are, I believe, 3 of each, but there's only 1 in each game, so randomly chosen out here. This says, at the end, I got them backwards, the top half is for the end, the bottom half is for the beginning. So what that means is...
I see why you would make that mistake.
When you begin the cycle, we'll read the bottom. So, start of the cycle, which would be at the beginning of the game in this case. In turn order, each player may take 1 material from the supply. Cool. All right, easy enough, right?
Yep.
Then, at the end of a cycle, we're going to potentially score 4 points each if you have met the prerequisite for that cycle. This one says, have 2 crew adjacent to a colony center. Well, in this case, I would have 2 crew adjacent to a colony center. This one is not, but I have 2, and I would score the 4 points. As it is, nobody else would. Then when we enter this one, we will do the same for those, and then here, and then we go into endgame scoring at the end of the 9th round. Does all that make sense?
Yep.
All right, let's go over endgame scoring, and then we can actually get started with the game. So endgame scoring is you're going to score, obviously, whatever points you have acquired during the game. Then, any artifacts that you have left in your supply are worth 1 point each. Then any cultural achievements, i.e. endgame scorings, you're going to go ahead and do any of those. And then we're going to go into colony majorities. And this is where having more pods and more crew out here. Now, obviously, you would need pods underneath these, but indulge me for just, go ahead, throw 3 out there, no more for you. And it doesn't matter where they are for that. All right. So based on whoever has the fewest, so in this case, Chris only has 1 out here. That's going to be the baseline. They're going to score 0 points. Then based on how many more each player has than the player with the fewest, they're going to score based on a scale. So Chris has 1. In this case, Ken has 3. He has 2 more than, and if he had 1 more, it'd be 1 point. 2 more would be 3 points. 6 points if 3 more. 4 points, or 10 points if 4 more. And 5 or more will give him 15 points. Okay, so in this case, there's 1, so it's a difference of 2. Ken would score 3 points. As it were, I have 1, 2, 3, 4. He has 1, so it's a difference of 3. I would score 6 points. We would do that majority scoring here, then here, then here. And so obviously it could change between who has majorities and who has the fewest. Does all that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome. Let's rock and roll. That's Beta Colony. Y'all.
All right.
All right. Any questions from the peanut gallery? Okay. No? All right, good.